All right, let's do it. So our homework today looks like this, and it's called Chapter 7, Homework 6. So make sure you put your name. Also, it's very handy if you put the date and the period on the paper. All right, so let's get started. Now we have a triangle, and it says find the perimeter. And the problem here is that a lot of students might here want to add these up and equal 180, and that is not true, right? Sides don't add up to 180. Like if I had an equilateral triangle and all of the sides were 3 centimeters, the perimeter would be 3 plus 3 plus 3. Obviously that doesn't add up to 180. So what the students are confusing here is that the 3 angles would add up to 180, but I don't know what those angle measurements are. However, I do know something. I know the left and the right angle are equal, which means I know this is an isosceles triangle. I also know that that must mean that if those measurements are the same, then these opposite sides would have to be congruent. Isosceles triangles have 2 equal sides and 2 equal angles. That's right out of our notes for isosceles triangle. So they're telling you it's isosceles because it has 2 equal angles. So you know that these 2 sides have to be equal. Now, this side doesn't really matter to figure out what x is, but it will matter here in a minute because I want to add up all 3 sides. Okay, so now I know that the left and the right has to be equal length. So I can say that AB has to equal BC. Side AB has to equal side BC because it's an isosceles triangle. So if I substitute, I can get x by itself, and then that will help me figure out the length of that side. Okay, so if I subtract and I add, okay, so I pretty quickly found the mystery of the x. X is 10, but that's not the perimeter, so I'm not going to fall for that, but 10 does play a role in the problem. Now, since I've solved the mystery of the x, I can plug it into the problem. So if x is in fact 10, 5 times 10, and then I subtract 19, so 50 take away 19, so that would be 31. Okay, so I'm willing to bet this side is also 31, but let's just double check. So 2 times 10 plus 11 would be 20 plus 11, which is also 31. Now I have the right information I need to find the perimeter of this triangle. So the perimeter of any triangle would just be add up the 3 sides. So we know one side is 31, the other side is 31, and the bottom is 16. So when I add these up, I get 78. Aha! That's why my answer is 78. Now you see 31 did play a role. That's the length of one side. So this was x, this was the length of one side, this was just a subtraction, and this was our answer. Let's go to the next question. This one's an interesting one too. So you have a triangle, and you know the big triangle is isosceles, okay? Which means that these 2 angles must be equal. And so I'm actually thinking about this shape in terms of it sideways, because I think that's where logic plays into figuring out what would be a possible measurement for angle XWY. So XWY is what they're asking. What is a possible measurement? So that's what the question's asking. What would be an angle here? And the word possible is making us think we can't solve for it, but we can use logic to at least eliminate some choices. So I'm going to redraw this shape because we're used to looking at isosceles triangles vertically instead of horizontally. So they've said here that the triangle XV, and the one on top here is W, they've said that they've taken a line and it looks like, and I can kind of tell logically, they didn't go straight down like an altitude and go boo and make a 90-degree angle. I know they didn't because one side is 11 and one side is 17. So it should kind of be obvious here. We might be able to draw an even bigger triangle. We know these two sides are equal. These two angles are equal because it is an isosceles triangle. But now I kind of know that if this is 29, I know, in fact, that because the bottom didn't get cut in half, this angle didn't cut in half. And so instead of being the same number here, these angles are not going to be the same number either. So this has to be an angle smaller than 29. And we could figure this out logically. So notice that none of the answers are smaller than 29. I know it's not 29, or else the isosceles triangle would have had the same, the base would have been cut in half, and that would have been 29. But it wasn't. And a number bigger than 29 would not have made sense because notice how this segment is smaller than this one. And so the only one that would be a possible value would be A. Again, I can draw this a little bit bigger and exaggerate it. Notice if I'm tending a little bit to the left here, if that's 11 and that's 17, if that's 29, notice it's forcing this angle to be smaller than 29 if in fact it's an isosceles triangle. Hopefully that's making sense. Okay, now they're doing it again. This time they took the isosceles triangle, which means it has two equal angle here's my base angles and equal sides, and now they distorted this picture. They are purposefully making this distorted because notice how 48 is supposed to be bigger than 42. So I'm not going to fall for their trick. I'm going to redraw the shape in MO. And I'm going to actually draw it more closely to what they're describing. So they're saying the angle on the right, 48, is bigger than the angle on the left. So it's actually similar to the one I just drew here. This angle 48 is bigger than 42, which means we know that this length, MP, has to be smaller than PQ. Because again, for the same reason as the last problem, this logically would make sense. We also know that it's an isosceles triangle. These two angles, we know that angle M would have to be congruent to angle Q because side MN is congruent to side NQ. We were told they were isosceles triangles. And then, what else do we know here? So let's just try that out. So let's see. I got MNP is greater than ONP. MNP is greater than ONP. Well, in fact, we know that's not true. We know 42 is not greater than 48. Okay. Do we know MNP? MNP, which is 42, and ONP, which is 48. Yes, we know the number 42. Ooh, my lights went out there. Sorry about that. Is great. 42 is less than 48, so that's going to be a yes. We're going to select this one. And then MN is greater than OP. So MN, no, we redrew the picture. We know MN is actually less than, I thought that was a Q. I guess it's an O. OP. We know MP has to be less than OP because 42 is less than 48. So this is going to be a no. And now let's look at MP is less than OP. MP is less than OP. Yep. Oh, this is length OP. We know that that is true. We know that this has to be less than that, just like what happened here. 11 is less than 17. So this one's going to be a yes. Then is NP equal to NP? Well, that's got to be true. That's reflexive. This line segment is the same line segment and is shared by both sides, so this has to be a true statement, yes. And last, are the two triangles congruent? Well, I think it's pretty obvious that they're not. The two angles are not congruent. This triangle on the right looks quite a bit bigger than the one on the left, so that's going to be a big no. Again, taking a look, we have no, yes, no, and then yes, yes, no. Thanks for joining us. Check out the video for the one on the back.